So, right. We are dealing with the 19th verse. The 19th verse says, Tulyanindas Dirmauni Sandushto Yena Kenachit Anikeda Sthiramati Bhaktiman Me Priyonara. So this verse establishes the fact that the highest devotee, the devotee who is dear to the Lord, is also a Sthita Prajna, a man of steady wisdom. Now the last verse. Ye tu dharmyamridamidam yadhoktam paryupasati shraddhadhana mat parama bhakta te ativa me priya. Those devotees, those great ideal devotees who follow this dharma. Dharma, the word dharma comes from a Sanskrit root dhr. The dhr itself means something which preserves, which supports, which is the foundation of everything. That's the meaning, dhrdharyati. Something which supports. See, what is the support of the society? Certain conventions, laws and practices, accepted practices in social life. Certain do's and don'ts which make it possible for one to live happily in society. So these values preserve social life. So dharma in fact means something which supports, which sustains an ordered and harmonious life in society. In that sense, it's a stabilizing, regulating and supporting factor of social life. And Lord Krishna says, these characteristics, these attributes of an ideal, real devotee is in fact support of an ideal society, because a society which consists of those who are trying, at least striving to become an ideal devotee as described in these previous verses, that society will be stable and it will be harmonious. So the social aspect of religion is clearly implied here. So a bhakta or a jnani, a man of wisdom or a man of devotion, or a man who practices karma yoga, by his very nature he will be an ideal citizen of the country, a responsible member of society, and also an ideal member of his family, whatever role he plays in that family or society or nation. He will be an ideal. That point is stressed here, dharmyam. Dharmyam, there is something which is related to the stability or support or the harmonious existence of social life. Amrita means something which is eternal, immortal, deathless. These are the meanings implied the word Amritam. That which is not death, deathless, which means immortal. So these values make you immortal. Those who practice these values become immortal because these values themselves are immortal values. Those who do that, those who practice these values, so you can find that Adveshta sarvabhudana maitra karuna evaja nirmamo nirahankara samadukha sukhakshami sandushta sadadam yogi yatatma dridhanishchaya, etc. These are a number of attributes beginning with the 13th verse right up to 19th verse. All these characteristics, they include not only those values which make you a devotee, an ideal member of family, an ideal citizen of the country, and a responsible part of social system. So, plus it also contains the highest spiritual value. It helps you to grow spiritually. In a way, we can say this verse expands the idea contained in the small epithet which Swamiji says, Atmana Mokshartham Jagat Hitaya. Jagat Hitaya, that means dharmyam, means good for the world, good for society, good for collective existence of human society. That is Jagat Hitaya, Swamiji means for the good of all. And then for one's own spiritual progress. The idea that this message is meant for one's own spiritual progress is implied in the word Amritam, because it makes you spiritually immortal. In fact, your own existence depends upon the ideal that you consider to be the highest in your life. That is true in a very, very ordinary sense also. So a man's progress or his status or his evolution in society very much depends upon the ideal that he considers to be the most desirable, the most, the highest that he wants to achieve. A man, see, those who want to be scientists and those who consider that to be a scientist is the greatest thing that one can aspire for. And he will put all his time, energy and everything into that effort, and he will naturally become a great scientist. And this is true of all the professions or vocations in human life. So those who uphold the immortal spiritual values themselves become immortal. So that's why this message contained in this text, in this Bhakti Yoga chapter, is called Dharmyam and Amritam. That is good for society. It is a sustaining, regulating and preserving principle. It preserves social values. It turns a person from the position of a small member of his family into an ideal citizen of his country, and a responsible part of the social system. And then the Lord Krishna says, Shraddha Dhanaha. Shraddha, as I said earlier, Shraddha, in a way, it's the totality of all that you may mean by concentration, integrity, earnestness, sincerity, honesty, and all this. That's what is implied by this word Shraddha. So those who have got this tremendous, this intense earnestness, and those who practice these values with this earnestness. And again, Mat Paramaha. Mat Paramaha means those who consider me as the Parama means the supreme goal. Those who consider me as the supreme goal means those who consider God as the supreme reality to be achieved. Here we have to remember, with regard to those who worship God as a divine person, they may consider God as a supreme divine person, and naturally they direct all their actions towards God, which makes them God-oriented. And those who look upon God as the impersonal supreme principle, they also direct all their energies, concentration and activities towards the supreme idea, supreme principle. Naturally, they become responsible citizens of a country and also spiritual seekers in the true sense of the term. That's what is implied here. Bhaktaste ativa me priyaha. Such great men are my dear devotees. This is the point that is stressed here. Now, in fact, Lord Krishna, uh, not just once, very often, uh, gives a portrayal, a very graphic description of the concept of ideal citizenship, ideal man. Ideal man could mean ideal woman also, that should be implied, in ancient India. And in Gita it comes very often, and not only in Gita, but even in many of the classical literary works, this appears. You find, even fiction gives a more intimate picture of social life. Say in a novel or a short story or in a classic, the characters may be fictitious imaginary characters. But such books give a more intimate and more correct portrayal of the reality of social life than a book of history. Because a book of history sometimes is just a list of facts. But the drama of social life behind is not often described by the historian. So you find the life of an ideal citizen who combines in his life the qualities of an ideal citizen and the qualities of a spiritual seeker could be found in Kalidasa's books. It comes, in many cases happen in Raghuvamsha. Raghuvamsha is one of his important books. At the very beginning, Kalidasa was a great poet, supposed to be the greatest playwright and dramatist India ever produced. And he lived in the 2nd century AD. That means almost 400, 500 years before Shankaracharya. And he wrote many classic Abhijnana Shakuntalam, Manavidathimitram. All these are all well-known dramas. And his classical writings, poems, Kumarasambhava Raghuvamsha. In Raghuvamsha, Raghuvamsha is actually the story of the dynasty to which Sri Rama belonged. So, there he gives how ancient kings lived in those days. It is not imagination, remember. In fact, if you read the travelogues of Megasthenes who visited India in 305 BC, during the period of Chandragupta Maurya, one of the greatest emperors of India, whose empire extended, remember, from Samarkand to Sri Lanka, and from Burma and beyond Indonesia up to Afghanistan. So you have to think of the empire, almost double the size of today's India in subcontinent. Now, and Megasthenes gives a very graphic description of social life, of customs and practices prevalent in India in 4th century BC. If you read Megasthenes, and he was the Greek ambassador to Chandragupta's court, Magadha, capital of that empire was Pataliputra, sometimes called Rajyagraha, and near today's Patna, it's the capital of Bihar state. Anyway, I'm coming to the subject now. So Megasthenes gives an ideal picture of the great kings and citizens who combined in their life dharmyam and amrutam. That's the focusing point. Now, in Raghuvamsha, Kalidasa says, Shaishave abhyasta vidyanam yavvane vishayeshinam vardhage munivrittinam yoge nande tanutyajam. And before that he says, I shall explain in English, so you need not be put off these Sanskrit words. Before that he says, Tyagaya Sampradharthanam. That is, they collected money for giving up. Satyaya midabhashinam. They were not chatterboxes because they wanted to stick to truth. So you find this Tyagaya Sampradarthanam Satyaya Midabhashinam, then Prajaya Granedhinam. They married and they endured the life of an householder to preserve the lineage of the family. And Yeshashe Vijigishunam, that means they conquered the countries because they wanted to put down tyrants who were terrorizing poor subjects and to bring an order in their countries and thereby get great reputation. For that, they took to conquering nearby kingdoms. And then, after that, after this verse comes, Shaishave Abhyasta Vidyanam, Yavvini Visheshinam, Vadhage Munivrittinam, Tyagena Yogena Ante Tanutyajam. The idea is this: when they were young, remember, in those days, the life of an ideal citizen, not a mendicant. You have to remember one point: Hindu or Vedantic texts never insist, never say, assert that everyone should become a mendicant. It is absolutely wrong. In fact, this false idea is very often, it came to be associated with Vedantic tradition or Hindu tradition because of Buddhism. Buddhism, what happened? Buddhism opened doors and windows to all people. And unfortunately, maybe not because of Buddha, after around 200, 300 years after Buddha's passing away, mendicancy became the only ideal way of life. To be a monk became the only ideal way of life for every citizen of the country, whether that person deserves, he is willing or not. So what happened was, soldiers, artisans, traders, all people who normally support the existence of normal society, they all flocked into Buddhism and they all became monks. And according to historians, this indirectly created some imbalance in social structure. But this was, remember, this happened much later. In ancient times, during the Vedic age, mendicancy, especially mendicancy or life of renunciation from childhood or from youth, it was confined only to a small group of people who were extremely imbued with the spirit of renunciation and dispassion for the world. For common people, for kings and emperors, for responsible citizens of the country, what they should do, they should study well when they are young. So Shaishave Abhyasta Vidyana, that means when the Shaishava means childhood, boyhood. During that age, they should study well. They should study their culture and tradition, and they should also undergo a proper training which is essential for becoming an ideal householder. An householder who should be a support of society, who should look after their family, should bring up their children properly, and who should look after their parents. So Shaishavi Abhyasta Vidyana means when they were young, they studied, they got trained to become ideal householders, ideal members of society. And when they were young, they married, and they normally, they will marry and they will have children, and in this way they preserved the social equilibrium. And when they were when they were old, again they didn't continue in their house, immersed in worldly pursuits, no. They took to spiritual life. Either they will retire to a lonely place, or they will go to some hermitages in the forest and spend the rest of their lifetime in meditation, in contemplation, in reading scriptures. And many of the great sages many of the great teachers whose names are mentioned in the Upanishadic and Vedic literature, the great teachers like Sandipani, Vasishtha. They were all, in fact, munis. Munis, after Grihasthasama, they retired to the forests, and the old wife and old husband living together, spending their time contemplating on God, immersed in meditation. And again, much more important, they used to teach this Vedic law, the spiritual literature, to young members of the society. So, in the Vedic literature and Puranic literature, you would find stories of kings and emperors and young princes walking thousands of kilometers all the way to Himalayan hermitages to spend their time there, to undergo training. Remember, not only in spiritual subjects, that's very important, in secular subjects. In fact, the Vedic curriculum included not only meditation and worship of God, it is absolutely wrong, not only spiritual, but also secular discipline, like martial arts, the stagecraft, and then collection of taxes. All these are very graphically described in the later Brahmana literature and the Smriti literature. I will go into those details right now. So all the secular subjects were also taught. Remember, not only spiritual or religious texts. Secular subjects were taught to train these youngsters, to make them fit administrators, fit citizens, correct, ideal citizens of the country. So that's why, Vardhake Munivrittina, and then after that, Yogena Ande Tanutyaja means they used to give up their body. By meditating, they used to bring forth the fire within, and in that fire they will throw their body. It's not suicide. It's not, remember, it's not suicide. When we read or hear those things, and when we try to understand those ideas from a modern standpoint, we are likely to be misled into wrong ideas. I mean, when they are very young, in lonely place, they will meditate, and then when they feel that they have become spiritually enlightened, then this body, anyhow, it is going to perish. They used to, sometimes they feel natural death, sometimes they will themselves put their body in fire. These are all very important. Now, the idea is this, So what I wanted to drive home was this synthesis of this combination of social responsibility and spiritual progress, spiritual evolution, which Swamiji emphasized when he gave this idea, Atmano Mokshartham Jagat Hitaya, for one's own spiritual progress and also for the good of society. These two aspects combined in the life of ancient Vedic sages and people in general, not only sages, remember, Vedic citizens. That's what is implied here. Gita, after all, portrays the life of people, society living in those days. Sri Krishna refers to this in the 4th chapter. If you look up the 4th chapter, Imam Vivasude Yogam Proktavanaham Avayam Vivaswan Manave Praka Manu Diksha Kave Abravi Evam Parambara Praptam Imam Rajashriyo Viduhu Sakalena Ikha Mahada Yogo Nashta Parandava. In the 4th chapter, Sri Krishna explains how in ancient times great kings and emperors, mind you, not saints and sages, not monks, people who are working in society, people who would normally be very active, much more active than modern executives or administrators, because in those days, kings had their whole responsibility on their shoulders. There was no delegation of responsibilities. It's natural. So, and they combine in their life both the social aspect and also the individual spiritual aspect. And such great kings were called Rajashaya. You find in that verse. Evam Parambara Praptam Imam Rajashyo Viduhu. First, Krishna gives a list of the great administrators, ideal citizens, men of action of ancient times. Vivaswan, Manu, Ikshvaku, these are names of kings and administrators. And then he says, in this way, this great ideal of life, complete life, a compact, complete and dynamic ideal of life, which combines in it not only meditation but also action, not only spiritual ideas but also the realities of secular worldly life. One can lead a worldly life without being worldly minded. That if you want to know more about it, Sri Ramakrishna's Gospel is the best guide for it. Now here Lord Krishna gives a list of kings and administrators of ancient times. And then he says they used to be called Rajashaya. See, the meaning of this word according to Shankaracharya is somebody who is a king and also a sage. Rishi is a sage and Raja is a king. So Rajanascha, Rishayascha, Rajashaya. That is Shankaracharya's definition. Means people who were kings and also sages. They were saints and sages within because they were working hard, they were working for the good of society and country. At the same time, they were not slaves of work. They understood work. They understood the value and relevance and importance of material prosperity, the need and relevance of working for fulfilling one's desires in secular life. These are very important and necessary. They understood. At the same time, they also realized the limitation of material prosperity. Material prosperity is necessary, but there is something beyond that. So Shankaracharya has given a very, very scientific definition of the word Rajarshi. Not Shankaracharya. One of the commentators, one of those who further expanded and explained Shankara's words, which Shankara gave very briefly. He says, Rajatvam Aishwarya Sambhati, Rishitvam Tasyaha Sukshmartha Darsana Kshamatvam. If I explain in English, you will understand its relevance. See, the word kingliness implies prosperity, action, dynamism, efficiency, organization skill, science, technology, everything, all this. That's what is implied by kingliness. All those values which are necessary to make a man succeed in modern scientific, technological, industrial age are implied in that word, kingliness, Rajatvam. Now the other word is saintliness or sageliness, Rishitvam. It implies the ability to understand, the ability to go deeper into the nature of these material values. If you go deeper, you will understand these material values like science, technology, prosperity, efficiency, all these are necessary. But if you go deeper, if you look closer, you understand these are only necessary tools. They should not be ends in themselves. They are necessary, but one should also look for something higher and beyond this. And this is possible. To look beyond this is possible only if you know the limitation of material prosperity. The limitation is that it cannot bring us eternal peace and happiness. For that we have to look for some spiritual sustenance. It's called Amrdam is mentioned here. Dharmyam Amrdam. That's Lord Krishna says, Yetu Dharmya Amrdamidam. So these teachings, it is Dharmyam and Amrdam. It is necessary for social, economic and national life. It's a preserving, stabilizing factor in the social life, the family life, the national life of a man. At the same time, it is also a spiritual ideal which one should keep in mind while working in this world. So this is the end of the 12th chapter. Now, according to our notice program, we had to go to the 15th chapter. 15th chapter also very brief, 20 verses. But I don't think we'll be able to complete it. But we'll just go as far as time permits. It is the same 20 verses, both 12 and 15. Now, I know 15th chapter is very important. It combines at the beginning a brief description of the world in which we live, the world of which we are a part, which we experience every day, every moment, and also the supreme reality, which is portrayed in this book as Purushottama, the supreme person. That's the name of this chapter, Purushottama Yoga. So we will come to the first verse. So the first verse is Urdhamulam Mathasyakam Ashwattham Prakuravayam Shabdamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavid. So in this verse you can find at the very beginning the entire worldly existence. Not only the phenomenal world, but also the very fact of our transmigratory existence. We are born, we get involved in many activities, and again we die. So a man is born, he grows, he evolves, and slowly his body begins to decay and then gets destroyed, which we call death. And again he is reborn. Rebirth and law of karma, these are two important ideas which one should keep in mind when we try to understand the world. And incidentally, this rebirth and law of karma and the idea of cyclic existence, they were very important principles in the pre-Christian Greek thought, Plato, Aristotle. You find all these ideas. Pre-Christian Greek thought. Yesterday, as I said, Christianity got Romanized. So Romans becoming Christians. Christianity got colored by the Roman citizens. So what happened? Many of these great ideas, which perhaps must have existed before Constantine's conversion, slowly vanished or were relegated into irrelevance in later times. But law of karma and rebirth, though we cannot verify them in the laboratory of science and technology, they are much more intensely and intimately felt and experienced facts of life, much more than the theory of gravitation or anything, which we can verify. Many things we cannot scientifically explain, but within our hearts we know them to be facts of truth. So here you find a whole transmigratory existence, which is called samsara. Samsarati, the samsara, that's the meaning. It goes on evolving, changing, or rotation, cyclic existence. Now, this is compared to a mighty peepal tree. The peepal tree is a very big tree with so many branches, and a huge tree which spreads a vast shade, cool shade under it. Now, the whole phenomenal existence is compared to a huge people tree. But one difference, this tree has its roots above. Normally trees will have the roots below. This tree has its roots above. And what is this root? This root is the Supreme Reality, Brahman or Atman, which remains unchanged, which is the same. And according to the traditional interpretation of Advaitic philosophers, the root of this tree, which is above, so Urdhva Moolam, which is above, it is Brahman combined with the unmanifested power of mind. Let me explain, according to Advaita philosophy, this world as we find is described as unreal. I have to explain this word unreal. It doesn't mean something which does not exist at all. It is not non-existence. When we make the statement that this world is unreal, what we mean is this world is not absolutely real. Because to be absolutely real, it should be experienced without any change and should remain the same in all the three states of human experience, human knowledge, the waking, the dream and deep sleep states. And to be real, it should not have a beginning. Because anything which has a beginning will have an end. And also it will have a period between these two, which we call existence. And existence consists of not only existence, but also growth, evolution, decay and all that. That's why it ceases to vanish. I mentioned some days back the article which appeared in Scientific American. So as I said earlier, an insect may live for a few minutes, a bacteria. The earth may live for maybe 16 billion years or 13 billion years. It makes no difference. Both are equally unreal. In the sense, both are equally relative. Whether earth came into existence 13 billion years back or 12 billion years back and will vanish after a few billion years, or whether a bacterium or an amoeba or a small insect lives only for a few hours, it makes no difference. Both are equally unreal in the sense neither of this is absolutely real. But then we have to remember, Vedanta doesn't say they are absolutely unreal. Because we live in this world, we experience this world, we are part of this world. So, this world, we don't know where it came. To ask the world to think that when did this world come into existence is like asking, when did the roe become a snake? I remember the analogy that we described. You mistake the rope to be for the snake, and when you bring light, you understand the snake was only superimposition. It did not really exist there. Similarly, when we ask the question, when did the world come into existence? It's like asking the question, when did that rope become the snake? Where did the snake go away? When did it come there? How long it existed, etc. But we understand that the snake did not exist The snake didn't go anywhere because it was never there to begin with. We understand this only when we bring the light and when we realize that it is not a snake, it is only a piece of rope. Similarly, when we realize that there is the absolute reality, the Brahman, the Atman, is the only supreme reality, the world as such is mithya or relativity. We realize this only when we realize the supreme, when we get the supreme spiritual realization. That realization is this: Brahman is only reality, Atman is only reality. When we realize that, we understand everything else is only relative. Now, somebody may ask the question that where does the world go away when we realize that Brahman is only reality, Atman is only reality? We explained this for those who are listening to Mantrikya Karya class. This is a repetition, but we can't help it. The idea is this: the world doesn't go away anywhere, because when we use the word world, we mean the name and form that we associate with Brahman. Well, I shall take another analogy, example, that will make things very clear. Just remember a heap of clay lying somewhere and 100 vessels made of that sort of clay. Pots, pans, glasses, all made of clay. Well, as I said, yesterday, before the pot maker made the pot, clay and all this, it was only clay. And when these vessels are broken, then also it is clay. Then, do you think it is something other than clay when these vessels are sitting in front of you on the table? After breaking, it is clay, obvious. Before the pot maker started working, it was clay, of course. Then when these vessels are sitting in front of you, can you say it is something other than clay? Then also it is clay, but there is a difference. The clay has taken a form. And remember, this form is not eternal. That's why when you break it, the form vanishes. It becomes clay only. And because it has assumed a form, you call it, give a name also. It's a name and form. So names and forms are superimposed upon clay. And so we have got pots, pans, glasses, etc. Names and forms did not exist before pots and pans came into existence. They will not exist after these pots and pans have vanished. After you hammer it, and it becomes clay. Similarly, again another point I should be here. Now, what about those dust which when you hammer it, when you break these pots and pans, what about the dust? The dust is the same as it was before it became clay. What the names and forms have vanished, but they are clay only. Similarly, when you look upon Brahman, when you look upon Atman, the supreme reality, through the prism of time, space and causation, it is the world. Time, space and causation. These things are related to name and form. Because when you have name and form, they become associated with time, space and causation. For some time they have this form and you call it a name, and there is a reason because you did some processing, so the clay became pots and pans. This way, yesterday, you remember yesterday when Kanda Swami was reading, you remember when Swami used to say, when you associate time, space and causation, which is called Maya. Maya is nothing. Maya operates through these media, time, space and causation. Time, space and causation are not visible things, not obvious, but their obvious manifestation is name and form, nama and rupa as we call it. So when you associate with Nama and Rupa, these are called pots, pans, glasses, etc. Remove them, it is clay. Similarly, the world is nothing but Atman or Brahman plus name and form. When you look upon Brahman or Atman in association with name and form, that is time, space and causation, then you have this visible world. If you can think of Atman or Brahman minus name and form, then it is Brahman only. That's why Vedanta is called. In philosophy, we assert Surupa Drishtya Brahma, Nama Rupa Drishtya Jagat. This world is, when you look upon it through the eyes of name and form, it is world. But the true nature, that is when you don't associate the world with name and form, it is Brahman only. That's why, at the experience level, there is Brahman. So Brahma Satyam, Jagat Satyam. Turiyanandaji was a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. He came to San Francisco and he was the one who actually started the spiritual practices and all in Shanti Asana. His name is inseparably associated with the Sri Ramakrishna movement in San Francisco, in California. He was a great follower of Advaita, and he was a great ascetic. So when it is said that just before he passed away, the time he asked those who were sitting around him to repeat Brahma Satyam Jagat Satyam. Brahma Satyam Jagat Satyam, Brahman is real, Jagat is real. The supreme principle, Brahman is real, and also the world is real. Because the world is no more world now. You're looking upon the world not through the prism of name and form, but in its true essence. Just as a goldsmith, you go to a goldsmith shop and you try to sell or auction, I don't know, whatever you do, with golden ornaments. Goldsmith will look upon these ornaments and judge their value only on the basis of the value of gold. He won't see he won't see ornaments at all. Ornaments may have different names and forms. Because when he wants to buy it, he wants to know how much of real gold it contains. Because he is looking at it from the standpoint of gold. So a liberated soul, a highly evolved spiritual man who lives at the transcendental plane, he looks at this world the way a goldsmith looks at ornaments. He doesn't care for name and form because he knows that is something which he himself makes. When you wear it, you give a great importance to its shape and all that, aesthetic beauty, workmanship. But when a goldsmith buys it, he judges only on the basis of gold, quality of gold. So liberated soul looks upon this world as Brahman only. Just as a pot maker may look at different vessels made of clay as clay only, not pots. So this point should be understood. Now, in this verse, first verse, this world is equated to a peepal tree with its roots above. From that, these branches, leaves, all this come into existence. And it is called transmigratory existence. And now, it is called Ashwatham. If in this book you find Ashwatham Prahu, it is called Ashwatha. Ashwatha means something which doesn't exist tomorrow. So, Shwa nasthāsyate iti Ashwatha. Shwa means tomorrow. Something which doesn't exist tomorrow means it goes on changing. So, world we cannot say that it had a beginning, just as we cannot say the snake had a beginning. Snake never dies or never goes away because snake doesn't exist, only rope exists. So, in fact, this world is nothing but something we experience and something which vanishes the moment we realize the supreme reality. When we start looking upon the world without the medium of time, space and causation, without the instruments of name and form. Now, they speak of this tree, people tree, which is rooted above. And then they have got Chandamsi. Chandamsi, Chanda may actually means the prosodies, but actually here means Gayatri is 1 meter, different meters in Sanskrit, Vedic language. Chanda means meter. Here it means Vedas. What we mean by Vedas? Yasya Parnani. Parnani means leaves. Leaves are the Vedas. Now one who knows this supreme truth is the knower. Now the question arises, why is the world which is non-eternal, which is ever-changing and which is manifold, why is this world explained here? Why is this described here? This chapter deals with the transcendence and immanence of the divine supreme reality. That is the central topic. The transcendence and also the immanence of the supreme reality, supreme person. That's the subject topic that we are going to deal with in the 15th chapter. Why does this chapter begin with a description of the world? Now Shankaracharya says that unless you get a complete aversion towards this world, your mind will not go to a transcendental idea. Not that you should run away from this world, but unless you get a strong conviction that this world is not eternal, it is not going to last forever, it is changing, we have to live in this world, but we should also realize that this world is not eternal. In Swamiji, you may remember, Atmano Mokshartham Jagat Hidayacha. Swamiji deals with this subject in a different way, but the central thrust is the same. Now, the world is unreal, that is relative, that's meaning. Mithya means not absolutely unreal, not non-existence, but it is only relative. It comes and goes, it's changing. Now, what should be our attitude towards this world? Just now I mentioned, the purpose of describing this world is to fill your mind with some kind of aversion towards this world. Remember, aversion doesn't mean hatred here. An understanding of the transitory nature of what we normally take by mistake to be eternal. See a worldly minded man, a workaholic, he commits all sorts of irregularities, all sorts of crimes for money and wealth, thinking that wealth and money will bring everything for him. It will give him eternal peace, happiness. That's why people generally go out of the way to acquire material objects. But if they realize that wealth is necessary, but wealth should not be the supreme goal. It is necessary, it is relevant, it is useful, but it is not eternal. If a person gets this conviction, he may live in this world, but he will not belong to this world. He can live in this world, but need not belong to this world. Travel in a boat, but boat should be on the surface of the water. Water should not enter boat of human life. Now Swamiji says, the world is a gymnasium for us to work out our karmas. That is the classic statement of Swamiji's approach towards the world. The world is certainly not eternal. World also symbolizes all worldly pleasures, blind pursuit of worldly comforts. It's all these are implied, indicated by the word world. Now, one need not run away. One can make use of life in this world for his spiritual progress. The world is a gymnasium for us to work out our karmas. That's what Swamiji means. But to be able to work out our karmas, you should know how to live in this world. How to live in this world without being worldly minded. You should know how to travel in a boat, how to drive a boat. If you don't know how to drive a boat, the boat will not remain on the surface of the water. The water will remain on top of the boat and boat will collapse, capsize. The Sri Ramakrishna says, water of worldliness should not enter the boat of human life. Then human life will capsize. So to make use of this world for our good, the gymnasium is a place where you go and do exercise for health. It is not a place where you live eternally. It is a place where you make use of some instruments available there, temporarily, for some practical benefits, health or whatever it is. But you should also know how to make use of those instruments. Similarly, Swamiji says the world is a gymnasium for us to work out our karmas. But to be able to correctly or properly make use of this world and live in this world, we must understand it is transitory nature. So Shankaracharya says, of course, remember Shankaracharya lived in the 8th century, Swamiji lived in the 19th century, the later part of 19th century. So naturally the language, the emphasis will be different. Shankaracharya says, Tatra tavat vriksharupa kalpanaya vairagya hetohu samsara rupam varnayati viraktasya hi samsarat bhagavat tattwajnane adhikaru na anyasya iti. What Shankaracharya means is this. Unless you have a strong dispassion, detachment. Well, aversion is the word normally used in translations, but you have to understand dispassion, detachment. Not running away, but detachment, dispassion. Unless you have a strong dispassion and detachment towards worldly objects, you cannot think of something transcendental. In fact, any human attempt to understand anything transcendental is possible only if there is a little aversion and dispassion towards the mundane, empirical, everyday experiences. So you take great interest in philosophy, music, painting, drawing, or whatever, all this literature, whatever. Only when you are not too much concerned with the food that you eat or the clothes that you wear, if you spend all the time and mental energies on what animals also do, eating food and all that, then nobody can take interest in science, in philosophy, in history, aesthetics, or any of these things. These are not necessarily spiritual subjects. So even to think of something beyond the present, beyond the empirical, beyond what we experience at the level of the five senses of perception, to go even an inch beyond that, you should have an understanding of the transitory nature of mundane worldly pursuits. That otherwise you can't have scientists who spend long hours forgetting many of the things. Newton, you might have heard of Newton. He didn't bother about where he was living or food that he was eating. So the guest will come, he will forget he has invited them, and that man will sit there waiting eternally, and Newton will be busy with his scientific research. These things happen. Of course, this is an extreme case. But wherever you find human attempt turning towards some transcendental idea, just at least an inch beyond the present, beyond the peripheral, beyond the transitory, the phenomenal, there is always an attempt to go beyond the present, to have a leap, have a glimpse at the transcendental. Otherwise, this is not possible. So that's why the great Advaita teacher Shankaracharya says, Vairagya hetu samsara rupam varnayati. Just to create in your mind an idea of the transitory nature, the perishable nature of the world in which we live, and thereby make you convinced that there is something beyond this visible world that you should seek after, that you should investigate into. For that purpose, this world is being explained. That is Shankaracharya's explanation. Now we will come to the end of it. We have got nearly 20-25 minutes for discussion.
Swami, would you talk about the bridge to the transcendental? Like you said, you start having to put that in your mind to begin to create it, so that you're, like you would go from worldly activities, attachments, concerns, and then move away from that toward the transcendental, so that you can prepare yourself to be in that space of understanding or at least approach.
Yeah.
That bridge, what is that like?
Well, in fact, that experience may come in the form of a shock or in the form of a revelation. See, it varies from individual to individual. For some individuals, it could come in the form of a shocking experience. Their life, say something they try to achieve, but suddenly in a flash the idea comes that it is impossible. All these attempts are futile. So you try to turn your attention in another direction. Sometimes it can be in the form of a shock from domestic life. Not always. Remember, it doesn't always happen, because many people are not able to turn towards the transcendental, even if they get the worst shocks in life. So it also depends upon human evolution. If that individual if he had some acquaintance with transcendental ideas in the early parts of their life or maybe previous life, and then they have to face a shocking experience. You work hard for things, and then things take a not totally unexpected turn. That gives you a shock, bit of a shock. But you are already aware, at least intellectually, of some transcendental ideas which are beyond, which are different from the mundane ideas that you have been pursuing so far. Then mind may turn in that direction. Not always to spiritual ideas. You find this happening in many great poets and painters also. Those who are not so highly evolved, those who don't have any acquaintance with the higher spiritual ideas, they may turn to painting, music, literature, philosophy and so on. And those who are still lower may try to run away from themselves, take to drinks, drugs and all that, crimes and all that. So it can turn into some kind of misanthropism. Means total hatred for content creation. It happens. It can make a misanthrope. It can take a person towards undesirable practices in life. And for those who are highly evolved, those who have had some experience or some familiarity with the higher spiritual idea, suddenly they feel, oh, this is all right, I should turn. The mind goes in that direction. So unless you have had some acquaintance with the higher spiritual idea, mind won't go in that direction. Mind may sometimes drag a man down. You can find all this. See, all shocking experiences do not make men spiritual. Otherwise, the prisons and the juvenile homes will be empty. So it doesn't happen. But in many cases, it does happen. Here, what the great teacher means is this: for those who have got some spiritual understanding, spiritual background, but still they are not convinced of the transitory nature, the non-eternal nature of the world. If we can convince them of the true nature of the world, their mind may turn towards the spiritual transcendental. For that purpose, the world is samsara, the worldly existence, a transmigratory existence, its transitoriness, its perishable nature is being graphically described in the beginning of the chapter. That's what the great Advaita teacher means.
The state of mind is very important when you say a person does have transcendental experience.
Yes, state of mind is very important. State of mind is very important. See, in society, you often find children coming from troubled homes. They take to drugs and crimes, and some of them, when they come in contact with high spiritual ideas, suddenly they take a plunge into it. And sometimes you find the lives of some great, of course, a few I am familiar with, the author of a famous work, you can have a copy here in San Francisco Library, Narayaniyam, you might have heard. It's a classic, it's a great Sanskrit classic, one of the greatest in Sanskrit literature. It was written by a great scholar who lived in 16th century. He was a great scholar, outstanding scholar in all the known branches of learning. So far as Sanskrit language is concerned, all the Vedas, all systems of thought, astrology, everything. But then he had devotion. He was intellectually familiar with all the great texts, but he was still not a spiritual seeker. So he was leading an ordinary worldly life. So his teacher one day made an exclamation. He overheard this. What a pity, such a highly talented, cultured man coming from such a high cultured family. He's supposed to be one of the greatest scholars of all times in India. So he was not a saint, remember. He was a saintly man, but you cannot compare him with Shankaracharya, Sri Ramakrishna or such people. But there was you can compare him with Tulasidas, such people. There are some great men, sudden change made them great saints. So this teacher made a statement, well, what a pity, this man, such a gifted man, is not turning to the eternal path of spiritual liberation. This remark he overheard. I won't go into details, but it shocked him. He was not very particular about his daily oblations, his meditation, all the rituals associated with the traditional families. Though he was born in such a background, all these relations, or his father, all of them were very devoted people. But this man, he was so intellectually gifted that he became slightly arrogant, and he thought that intellectual knowledge is enough, there is nothing beyond it. So his great teacher, the teacher who was teaching him grammar, advanced books, made a remark, an exclamation, what a pity, this man, such a gifted man, I never saw anybody like him, and he is not turning to spiritual life. He overheard this, and that brought a complete change in his life. And before that, he had written so many books on Mimamsa means grammar and so on. But after this, you know what happened? His teacher fell sick. And a great spiritual man, a great spiritual seeker can take over the disease from another person. This is what they believe. And of course, by the time the author of the Narayanam, this great scholar, he had already become a great spiritual person through his piety and devotion. And then he took over the disease, and he himself became affected by the rheumatic disease. And then he went to the nearby temple. And there he sat. And every day, that place is still there, the place where he sat. This is not hearsay or mythology. He is a historical figure who lived nearly 300, 400, 500 years. His house, the place where he lived, the place where he sat and wrote his books, so still you can visit. The instrument that he used for writing all that. Some early 16th century. So, and then he went to the temple and he took a vow that he will not leave the temple till he was completely cured of this. So every day morning he would take a dip in that ancient pond in cold water, come there and sit and meditate, and every day he will write 10 verses which came to his mind. Sometimes more verses will come. So within a few days, within less than 3 months, he completed a huge book. And by the end of writing, he got a vision of the Lord. The last verse is Agre Pasyami, I am seeing in front of me the divine form of the Lord. That's the last verse, because he saw. And with that, the book comes to an end. And he lived long. He is still considered to be a great spiritual, very great spiritual person. That book is Narayanam. You can find our mission's Vice President Swami Tattwamayananda ji has translated that book into English, from Sanskrit into English. That book you find in St. Francisco Library. It's called Narayaniyam. It is called. Narayaniyam means the book devoted to Narayana. So this is the book. So he had memorized the whole Bhagavata Purana. So all those ideas mentally he meditated upon Lord Krishna and his divine place, and then all these ideas manifested in his mind in the form of words, and he wrote down. Tattwamayananda has written his life also in the introduction you find. So here you find just an exclamation which he overheard, turned him into. It is said that Tulsidas ji was so much addicted to his wife and all that, and one day the wife told, "What a fellow you are, why don't you turn your mind to God?" And that admonition changed his mind and he became a saintly. So you can find this happening. Sometimes it could be some inexplicable events. See, there was a great saint living in Bombay, in Vajreshwari. His name was Paramahamsa. He was a great Paramahamsa. He lived in the early decades of 20th century. Once, and he was born in a humble family. He was the servant of a great administrative officer, the government of India. But a humble man, very obedient. So he followed his master to Kashi. And at reaching Kashi, he vanished. And he reappeared later, maybe after 30 years also he reappeared. In it's called the place, maybe Ratnagar knows, Vajreshwari. You heard of Vajreshwari in Bombay?
Yes, ma'am.
There the Paramahamsa, that old ashrama, the founder of that ashrama, his life is like that. It's a miracle. So this man went to Benares. Kashi is associated with so many spiritual personalities of ancient India, you know. He vanished, and after 30 years only he appeared, and he was a great divine person. And he lived the rest of his lifetime in Vajreshri Bombay. He was born somewhere in Kerala, but after going to Kashi, he never appeared. So, then you heard of him? Yeah. No, Muktananda's Guru. Paramahamsa, Muktananda is an ordinary, he is Guru. Muktananda's Guru was a great man. Muktananda is an ordinary saint there. He's a sannyasi. But this Guru, his Guru was a great saint, was divine person. He was the one who founded. After him, the people came to see him and all. Now whenever people came to him, he would speak in different languages. Some people, from France, they came, they would speak in French. We don't know how to explain. You may call it miracle or you may call it superstition. But it's narrated in his life. But he lived not not long back. So you find this. So, and then later somebody asked him, he won't write his own life. Somebody asked him in Benares, when he went and he met somebody, went to an ancient ashrama, and when he went to the ashrama, he forgot his previous background and he lived there for 30 years. And he never, but for a long time he did not remember where he was coming from. He became a different, he became a different man, he became a saint. Such things happened. His name, of course, he can be very fat. You heard of it? His picture is everywhere. The Guru, Muktananda's Guru. Very fat, huge man. He was like, his picture looks like the picture of Trilinga Swami, almost resembling that. Like that. So you can find such. So this happens to different people in different ways.
What's the name of the big scholar that you spoke
and Melpattu Narayana Bhatta. Melpattu Narayana Bhatta. You may have heard of that Narayaniyam Sodha. In Madras Math publication, you can Narayaniyam is Narayana Bhatta. Narayana Bhatta, Diriyur Bhatta. You can read Tapasyananda just written, translated his book, and there is a long description, elaborate description. In English books, Madras Math publication. He published this book long back, 50s. It has run into several editions. It is read as a sacred book alongside Bhagavad in many places in South India, Maharashtra. It is supposed to be one of the greatest devotional hymns ever written in Sanskrit language. So 1000 verses. 1000 verses. The last verse describes how the Lord appeared to him. You may find here perhaps. In our library, San Francisco, there are many copies.
So the title of the book is
Narayaniyam. Yes.
Narayaniyam?
Yes. Narayana, you remember? Means a book on Narayana. That's the meaning. The author's name also is Narayana, and the Lord whom he describes also Narayana. You can read that book. His famous books are there, which are textbooks now, and advanced Mimamsa, Ved Vyakarana, high advanced books. So, in fact, Madan Mohan Malaviya, the founder of Benares University, came on a pilgrimage to see the place. We read all of them. And then only the first translation took place in the beginning of 20th century. Then a mission, it has got many translations. Mission has published a very wonderful translation by Tapasyananda. So such things happened in many great saints.
What's the meaning of Narayana?
Oh, yes.
What is the significance of that?
Yes. Ayanam means, the goal, the repository, the goal, the atishtanam, the support, all this means. Naranam, Ayanam is Narayana. Narayana means human beings. He is the support, supreme goal of human effort.
Ayan
could mean story also. It could mean story also.
It's not
Ramayana.
Ayan. Uttaraya Lakshmi, does it not mean
That is-
crossing over?
And that is a movement. It could mean movement. Movement. Different meanings. Ayanam can mean story, movement, support, direction, and so on.
So Narayani is the same.
From that, anything which is related to Narayana is Narayaniyam. Anything related or about describing Narayana can be called Narayaniyam. And this is Kavyam, so this is a neutral gender. So
No, I'm saying
He's
that
talking about Striyamit.
Narayani
That one.
oh, that is Strilinga Pratyaya. So it is Strilinga. So I think we have no more discussions. We will continue this 15th chapter again. I just gave a brief introduction to the first verse, because the first verse, a new reader may feel very strange. A tree is described, a tree with branches below and roots above. So all these roots above means its support, foundation is the absolute reality. From that, this manifold, this pluralistic world comes into existence, which we cannot fully understand. So long as we live this world, we are not able to fully understand its transitory nature. The moment we understand that this world is transitory, we also realize what is not transitory, what is eternal, what is beyond all this. The moment we understand the relative is relative, then we understand what is not relative, the eternal. So that is how the text proceeds. Okay. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.